Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for joining our webinar today. And thank you also in particular to our great speakers who are with us today. And before we dive into sort of like their perspectives, I would love to give you a tiny bit of context. So Leapsome actually conducted a global study. We do this annually. We just published our global study for this year. And we surveyed over 2,500 HR managers, employees, HR leaders, regular sort of like line managers. And the results really underline some of the modern challenges or current challenges that HR teams are facing. Many of us know the economy is slightly tougher, and people teams are really some of the teams that truly feel that pressure. So in the recent study, what was reported is that over 2/3 of HR leaders reported challenges in navigating this business landscape, and particularly in regards to budget cutbacks. So what our research revealed is 85% of HR teams really feel the pressure to reduce their budgets, and 86% are actually expecting to consolidate some of their technology in their tool stack. And on top of that, what the research also shows, and we know this is a bit of a theme we've been discussing for a while, is that HR teams often still struggle to really provide and show and demonstrate the business case, the ROI of some of the HR initiatives. And that's becoming even more pressuring at a time when you really need to prove that case in order to unlock or maintain some of your budget. So in today's session, we're really, really excited to be diving into these conversations and discussions with Pernilla Wraneus, VP and Global Head People and Culture at Accedo, Marie Richter, Fractional VP People Fractional VP People and Consultant, and Lee Bage, Group VP of People Operations at Valtech. And we are exploring actionable strategies for making thoughtful cutbacks, defending essential expenses, as well as optimizing your HR tools to drive efficiency and impact. And for those of you who are joining from the US, we just wanted to also share that we are a SHRM recertification provider. So you're eligible to one SHRM point. The codes to retrieve this will be shared in the follow-up email. So be on the lookout for that. And without further ado, I would love to actually now do a very quick round of introductions. And Pernilla, why don't you start?
Okay. Hi, everyone. Very nice to be here. My name is Pernilla Wraneus. I'm based in Stockholm, in Sweden, and I am a VP People and Culture for Accedo, which is a tech company in the streaming business. So customers that you most likely know about, Paramount Plus, NBCU, Hallmark, and so on. So we're 600 employees globally in 15 countries, and I run a people and culture team based in these locations.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pernilla. And Marie, why don't you continue?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Marie. I'm based in Berlin, Germany. I'm an HR consultant, fractional VP People, and I mostly work with clients that are startups, scale-ups, anywhere in the tech industry, internationally, but mostly based in Germany.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Lee, over to you.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Lee. So I'm a Group VP of People Operations based out of the UK, working at Valtech. So I support around 8,000 colleagues across the globe, and we're a digital experience consultancy.
Amazing. Well, thank you all so much for joining us, and can't wait to hear your take. We actually have 3 parts to this webinar. And our first theme we're going to be talking about is making thoughtful cutbacks. And we'd like to actually kick us off with a poll. So if you go to the polling section that I think is on the bottom right, you should see the poll question coming up. And the question is, have you personally found it harder to get budget signed off this year compared to the last year? So while you all start answering that poll question, just to reiterate, in our study, over 2/3 of HR leaders reported challenges in navigating the current business landscape. So with every penny scrutinized, many people leaders are facing cutbacks. 1/2 experienced specific cutbacks already in the last year, and 85% are actually under further pressure to reduce HR budgets. So if we look at the polling results, we actually see also a very similar picture here. 64% still new answers coming in also said they're actually experiencing similar challenges. So moving over to our experts on the call, given that half or even more than half of HR leaders experienced budget cuts last year, could you share specific strategies you've personally employed to make thoughtful cutbacks without sacrificing your essential HR objectives, your essential HR programs? How are you prioritizing really the areas to cut back on and the ones to protect? Pernilla, do you want to start us off?
Of course. So I think for me, it's just been the question about doing more with less. So, for example, cutting back on recruitment activities, we have tried to put all that effort into employee branding instead. We have worked with sort of cultural calendars to share information about our sort of our global, naturally global, diverse organization. So trying to refocus our efforts and in this situation. Also really deep diving in when we're talking about prioritization, really focusing on keeping the eye on the ball when it comes to people development. So focusing on that, but doing much more with internal resources, using AI tools that I know that we will be talking about a little later on, creating those learnings and so on. So that's what we have been focusing on.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you so much. Who else wants to jump in? I think Lee, you look like you're about to start. Just please jump in.
Yeah, it's the I want to build on keeping the eye on the ball. So it's interesting, when do we react to this? When do we react to the environmental factors that cause us to go into hyperdrive and change the way we work? This question really resonates with me, particularly since the pandemic. And sorry for the CFOs if there is any listening, but they did take control and make budget cuts, and we didn't have the time to assess the cultural impact. And so at that time, I built this model. I call it kind of NCV, basically looking at the shape, size, profile, skill, competency, effectiveness, and the cost, budget, and return investment model. And there's loads of models out there, but it's a model that allowed me to review it kind of monthly. So it was almost like a continuous assessment framework that I used. And, you know, one of the big examples of this is we realized that a lot of our P&C colleagues on the ground are spending a lot of time doing a lot of administration. But we realized that there are areas in the world where it's talent rich, but relatively cost effective. And we pivoted and stood up a shared service model and started moving over some of the admin tasks so the people on the ground could spend more time adding value with their stakeholders. And yeah, it's just continuous for me. Assessment helps you stay one step ahead.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing. Maybe do you mind even like double clicking on how exactly, because I think it's really, really helpful sometimes to have these very tangible examples. So how did you apply that framework and got to this decision to really free up the local folks, have some of the stuff moving more into like the shared services? Like, how did you specifically do that and get that sort of like buy-in from all the stakeholders needed? Because I think these are the lovely examples that really help the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So we knew that time was precious and we needed to get through our priority backlog quicker because cost pressures were coming, and we just had to find efficiencies in the processes, i.e. systems or manual processes. And we know that we needed to create digital enablement. So we decided to not reduce the workforce, but just make sure we could have our business partners have strategic conversations around engagement and grow using a digital tech stack, for example. And to be able to do that, we spent a lot of time creating playbooks, how we could transition over some of the admin over to our shared services center that we stood up in Argentina, for example, which we know had high talent at a relatively low cost. And that effectively saved time. So, you know, every day, instead of 7, 8 hours working on admin or double clicking, 3-4 of those hours were strategic conversations about employee development and growth.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that. And maybe to move the conversation onto like a slightly different nuance. So Marie, if I could rephrase the question a bit further for you, is if we're looking ahead, how are you planning to adjust your HR strategies if economic conditions do not improve in the near term? How do you work with your customers? What's like your approach there?
Sure, and I think that's one of the questions that is occupying many people's minds at the moment, because you're not quite sure where things are heading. Obviously, things will probably turn at some point and look up again. I think one of the important things to keep in mind is, how do you want to build your workforce, not just within HR teams, but generally of the clients you work with or companies you work in, for them to be more flexible. So I think we've kind of talked about a couple of points here, looking at recruiting and maybe toning down the activities there. But I think one thing that I've seen companies do time and time again, and I think this is also, research, so this is not me making this up, is, obviously other people have explored this before, and to also be cautious of not reducing things down too much, because sometimes what you can get is a little bit of an overcorrection of pushing the brakes a little bit too hard when it comes to recruiting or other initiatives. And then once the economy starts picking up again, and you really want to be some of the first ones going and be at the front of the wave, then hiring these people again, putting up these programs and processes again, so you can go at full speed, might take a while. So what I've seen some of my clients do that I thought was really smart is also look at which of the HR functions and roles maybe grow proportionally or shrink proportionally to the rest of the organization. So that might be recruiting, as Pernilla already mentioned, maybe also HR business partners, because they're usually related to a specific cohort of employees that they look after. And maybe as a little bit of an intermediate step, make those a little bit more flexible. So maybe put people on more fixed term contracts in the meantime, or hire freelancers, so then you're able to be more reactive, more than you would be with permanent employees. But obviously that also depends on the region you're operating in, right? In some other countries such as the US, hiring and letting go of people might be a little bit easier. In some other countries like Germany are quite conservative in that sense. It might take their notice period might be something like 3 months or sometimes even longer. So being a little bit creative and maybe taking a little bit of a hit when it comes to the attractiveness as you as an employee. Obviously, only being able to offer fixed term contracts might not be as attractive in securing new talent, but it might just in the meantime give you that flexibility that you need to then bridge that gap until things are looking better again.
And what I maybe just quickly want to say to the audience, if you have questions, we probably don't have a lot of time for questions from the audience, but if you have questions, please type them in the chat, and I'm going to try to actually pull some from the chat into our conversation. But Lee, I think you also need to actually react to that question or to the point Marie just raised. At least I thought you were.
Yeah. I think having transient staff and T-shaped staff, I call it, whenever I design my org design, I think it's really important. I've got people in my team, might even be listening on this call, where they're people partners, but they also have deep specialism in like tech, or they might have a deep specialism in reward, and therefore when times are tight, then you can rely on them to fill out maybe where specialists would normally sit in that position. That's tactical for me. And the other one is potentially devolving some responsibility. So if you're a very paternal HR function, if you can start investing in training up managers and leaders, then you'll be able to get a bit more time back, because they're picking up some of those daily tasks.
Pernilla, did you have any sort of final thoughts on this?
No, but I agree with Marie. Taking things down to a bare minimum, or really, it can destroy your strategy altogether. So I think it's very important to keep some level of commitment to our function. And to your point, Lee, we have done the same. We have added sort of the competence responsibility or specialist responsibility to our teams. We have created teams around compensation, teams around learning, and they work together instead and taking on that sort of specialist role. And I think it's super important that, again, doing more with less. So really not maybe changing the strategy. I think that is not the way to go, even for the tough times. It's really the implementation and how you do things. So I think that's and I think it comes down, I think, when we're looking back at tough times, how you handle it. So it's more based on sort of the values really, and then the strategy. So agree with both of you.
Well, thank you so much. I already wrote down lots of great insights that I'm going to also try to summarize at the end of the session. And now moving over to our second big theme, and that's defending the most essential expenses. And I think something you also mentioned, the right level of internal resources, However, also like certain tooling that enables you. So again, we'd love to actually ask the folks in the audience. So please open the poll tab again. And once you've actually responded, you'll also see the results. So what's the number one most important technology or tool you need in your tech stack? So please take a moment to actually quickly participate in the poll. And coming back to also the research report that we just ran, the research we just ran, we are in the time where, again, like every cent is under the microscope, and many HR leaders find it increasingly necessary to prove the worth of HR initiatives and technology. So 60% of professionals find it challenging to prepare a business case for HR initiatives. 62% struggle to gather the people insights to support these cases, the data really that's at the core of approving or providing that business case. And 58% of HR leaders struggle to get budget approval. So there's this whole theme of like having the data, displaying the data, making the business case. And if we're looking at our poll results right here, we actually see there's both the performance management as well as employee data, document management, reporting that are very much on the top here with 43 and 41%. So those are some of the core databases and process platforms that you ultimately support your impact as a people team. So going back to our lovely panel here, and asking you, how do you prioritize or defend essential HR expenses to your CFO, you already mentioned, Lee, or overall sort of like upper management, how you effectively communicate the value of these investments, how do you secure funding, especially given the challenges that we see that sometimes it's really hard still for us to prove the ROI of the business case as HR teams.
Maybe if I could pick it off real quick, and then I'll leave it over to the people who are leading teams. I'm more of an external expert, I would say, right? So I'm a consultant. I work with some clients who face these issues. And one of the things I notice, and maybe you would internally as well, is that sometimes there can be a little bit of a disconnect between HR departments and the rest of the organization, but obviously there shouldn't be. So one of the main things I always recommend people is to really go out into the business, talk to the other execs, the CEOs, but also main stakeholders and employees to really understand what some of the core issues, main requirements and needs of the business are. So really understanding the strategy of where you're trying to go. I think sometimes within HR, there can be a tendency to maybe listen solely to employee polls and want to really meet their needs, which obviously comes with the best intentions, but really making sure that whatever you are trying to implement has traction. And to do that, I guess stakeholder buy-in is one of the main ways to achieve that, especially with regards to finance departments. So Lee already mentioned by talking to CFOs and then making big decisions, they're usually at the very core and heart and pulse of the organization when it comes to the numbers and the actual business and hard facts. So making sure that they're some of your strongest allies, that whenever you're trying to push initiatives, you already have their buy-in and you're aligned in that way. That really helps shape a unified image and position. So then you're able to really push for what is needed to get the company, not just the HR department, where it needs to go.
I completely relate to that, and I always say you've got to be laser focused to understand your business objectives. What the revenue, the cost, efficiency, and the growth. But you've got to use your holistic data sets and just make it really hard for the business to argue against it. But I always build my business cases with those key stakeholders. I never do it in isolation. I've been there. I've got burned. It makes it harder. You're skiing uphill. Just a tangible example, really quickly. So for a digital innovation consultancy that I work in, we know that 90% of our employees are billable for clients. We know time is like gold dust here. So every business case that I build, albeit tech, process, or people, we make sure we build time back into the business case, and therefore that translates to pounds in productivity. And that because that's what the clients want. We work back from what the client wants, which is our customer.
And for us, I think I'm lucky to work in a company where the people strategy is one of the three key pillars in the business strategy. So we have really identified, or the the key stakeholders are really identified, that for us to be successful in our overall business, we need the people strategy to be working. And for that, development is one of the key issues. So making sure, as you say, Lee, that we stay ahead of the curve, that we make sure that whatever investments we do will pay off somehow, if it's in time, if it's in sort of the strategic skill sets that we need in order to deliver. That's the key thing, I think. So for us, it's been not so hard actually to ask for money for these key investments, but you have to look at that. Is it going to give you really what you need for the business strategy? And this is where we need to keep our key stakeholders very, very close.
Yeah. Thank you so much for elaborating on this from your different perspectives. Could we maybe even double click on that a bit further and discuss, because not everybody is in as comfortable a situation, Pernilla, that they already have so much buy-in, right? So they might necessarily really have to make a very, very strong case to get these budgets or to be able to hold on to these budgets. So how do you use data, analytics? I think, Ellie, you said you always need to be on top of your data to really support your case for essential HR expenditures. May that be making a case for a new program or also showing the outcomes and the benefits of the programs you're running to other stakeholders. Like, I wonder, Pernilla, to what extent you also need to sort of like show back to the executives how that sort of like third pillar, being the people team, actually plays out for the organization. So if we just double click on how you use data, how you use analytics, I think that would be helpful for some folks in the audience.
Yes, I can go first. So what I'm showing now with the tool set that I have is that I'm able to draw conclusions, data from different modules. So how are low performers answering in our engagement survey? How are high performer responding to goals and so on? So that kind of data that I can show the worth of the investment, really show the employee journey and what benefit that brings with having sort of a suite of tools connecting and be able to draw conclusions. So that, and also of course going back to looking at hours of learnings, how many people sort of take learnings and so on, if that is one of our the key element, but also engagement scores and so on, of course. So all of that data is very important, and we're looking at it closely, and that also brings value to the stakeholders.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that.
I think also what really helps is looking left and right, so outside of your organization sometimes, right? So there can also be a tendency, and rightly so, right, to be very involved with your own company and your own, challenges and requirements, but then also talking to other companies and how they're fixing the issues, what their next innovative steps within HR or otherwise are, can really help build a case, right? So being able to say, hey, there are these other types of companies out there that are facing similar issues. Maybe they're similar to our company in these ways, or maybe also different. And these are some of the ways that they're tackling similar issues that we are facing. That really builds trust with executives and top leaders with the solution that you're bringing to the table, right? So it shows that you're not just, innovating in an ivory tower, but really dealing with what's going on in the market and around you and being informed, because, you can reinvent the wheel 100 times, but there might already be a great other solution out there that you yourself might not necessarily come up with. Not to say, you're not smart enough to, but there's just so much available out there for you to tap into as well.
Yeah, just to wrap that up, I think I agree with both those points. You get your data in from everywhere, you make sense of that data, but taking it one step further, I think, even if there's still some doubters at that stage, what's worked really well for me are pilots, free if possible with certain vendors and certain processes, etc. But proof of concept data, I think, is the one thing that tends to get it just past that last hurdle for me. So. That's a good thing to do.
Thank you all so much. I would love to actually take a few of the questions from the audience. So thank you, Nick, for your question. How do you deal with the pushback from teammates around doing more with less? We're going through a tough, challenging period, and some are willing to roll their sleeves up as a group team, and others are really pushing back. It is creating a challenging and equitable cultural dynamic. So that maybe links a bit to the first theme we've discussed, but how have you navigated that across your organizations or across the customers you work with?
I think maybe what some of these tough times, if I may, all have in common is that they can be great learning experiences, not just for the organization as a whole, but also for individuals. So whilst an organization might actually be going through layoffs, redundancy rounds, or just cutting hiring altogether, it doesn't mean you can't invest in people that are still around, and actually becomes even more important to be able to retain them, right? Also, especially when you have redundancy rounds and a lot of the existing employees aren't around anymore, the culture can shift, etc. So being able to provide an environment where there might be, stretch goals that they can work towards, and that might mean being a little bit uncomfortable in the short term, but really shaping it as learning opportunities for them, and then rewarding them with recognition, maybe even a promotion, and definitely also still handing out salary increases can be a win-win situation for those that might otherwise feel a little bit threatened by that.
And I also think it is a little bit eye on the prize, or seeing the end of the tunnel, or whatever metaphor you would like to use. But I think of course, not everyone is willing to roll up their sleeves, but if you have a good foundation in the team, and then of course prioritize and being bold to saying, okay, we will skip this year, we will do a light version of this process this year, and be fine with that, and saying that's fine. That I think, and then in order to prioritize other things that are more important. So by that, doing more with less. So I think it's both being bold and having sort of seeing what's at the end of the tunnel here, and we will have something else coming out stronger.
I agree with that, Pernilla, and I also think that don't be afraid to kind of say no, or question, is that linked to the objective? Can I bucket my work into something that's linking up to the North Star? And if it's not, I think it's up to leadership to make sure there's a safety there for all employees to be able to have that difficult conversation. And to your point there, Pernilla, not this time, let me manage your expectations, and this is why. I think something simple like that is very powerful.
Mm-hmm. All right, I think there's two questions where we can quickly also touch upon, one for Lee particularly. So you mentioned people strategy tying your people strategy back to support the case in a consultancy context. Can you please provide some examples? For example, performance or development activities generally take time away from billable work. So how do you navigate that?
Sorry, I missed that last bit. Sorry, Jenny.
Sorry, let me reopen the question. So Lee mentioned people strategy tying to time back to support the case in consultancy. Can you please provide some examples? As for example, performance or development activities generally take time away from billable work. So
yeah. In particular, so we used to have a yearly cycle, and everybody would collate feedback looking back 12 months. So you can only imagine the amount of time that takes just to collate it, to remember it, and then to have the discussions around feedback, for example. So we know that when we were going looking for a tool, that we need something that was more instant. So it was in time for the employee experience, but also we didn't have this bottleneck towards the end of the year where everybody had to take time out from delivering for clients to collate feedback over a period of 2 weeks. So it became a single tap rather than a big collation exercise. So that's one example. And then because we had the right system tech stack and it was seamless and automated, we reduced our review cycle from 12 weeks to 6 weeks. So that's one example of time back. And if you could take the median salary and do the math on that, there's huge return on investment. So there's just two really quick examples.
Mm-hmm. And then there was one quick follow-up question to you, Pernilla. How do you get the data? Through which tool do you gather it? Pernilla talked, for example, about high and low performers answer surveys. How do you measure it? Are your surveys not anonymous? So maybe also just to give folks an understanding of. the data?
Well, guess what? We're using Leapsome. So you get a good analytics in that too, where we have the result from the performance review. It's definitely anonymous, but we get. I actually don't know the tech behind it, to be honest, but we get good overviews of this in Leapsome. So happy about that.
So the performance cohort data is matched with the anonymous survey data, so you can filter your surveys.
Yeah, we can filter.
Performance cohorts. That's one. And I think we could take one more question. This was highly upvoted. These HR tech investments, development tech platforms usually require some time to show the ROI. How do you pitch this risk opportunity when the executive team is skeptical of people investments on the whole? So how do you bridge that time to be able to demonstrate impact? What has worked for you?
I think it probably starts even before you implement the tool, right? So in my work with clients and doing tool analysis and eventually implementations of them, a big aspect is getting user feedback of other companies that are already using them, right? Because there's only so much you can do in trying to analyze the tool yourself and talking to the tool providers themselves, but actually getting firsthand feedback from active users that you've already past that, I guess, probation time of testing and using those tools. That is really what makes the difference, right? So getting firsthand feedback and the good, the bad, and the ugly, and obviously there's always opportunities for tools to keep developing. So it's definitely not the end of the road and the final state of what a tool is, but that really has a huge impact, I feel.
Yeah, and I was just going to quickly expand on it as well. Having a really diligent requirements list that's really well thought out and you've taken your time on. So the diligence that will tell the story and get buy-in, but also get a free sandbox environment as quick as possible. Get people in the system, especially the big doubters. I think that starts within hearts and minds.
Awesome. And I think we're doing good on time. I think you're all doing amazing, giving very concrete, fast answers. So we can also take Julia's question here. How do you address the topic of leadership development if you don't have the right experts in-house? Does measuring financial ROI, growth and progress on critical leadership competencies and skills help in creating a business case around hiring an external expert? So particularly the ROI of investing into leadership development in particular.
I think maybe a quick fix and something to keep in mind is a lot of companies actually have great leadership capabilities internally as well. So obviously, yes, there should be leadership development maybe brought in from the externally or built up by the HR department that then all managers and leaders go through. However, actually tapping into the experts that you might have already hired and making sure they can transmit that knowledge to maybe some of the more junior, unexperienced leaders is a huge lever. And also creating and building a culture around that makes it a way more, I guess, in-house grown solution than only relying on external sources.
Yeah, for a quick example, sorry, Pernilla, really quick example. We have craft circles that we create. So a bit like two-way mentoring or coaching, but we create communities and circles that just share knowledge, and that should come at a free cost. It's just knowledge, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we're too modest sometimes. I think that we sit on a lot of experience and a lot of great knowledge. So we have created our own leadership programs with our internal resources. We have mentoring programs internally where, you don't have to be sort of super senior person to be a mentor to someone. You could really share experience and knowledge. So maybe sit up straight a little bit and be proud of what we have and what we know. We don't have to buy external resources all the time.
I think that's going to be a memorable quote. We're too modest too often in the people department. So definitely wrote that one down. Thanks for sharing all these great answers also to the audience's questions. I would now actually like to move on to our third theme, and that's optimizing your HR tools and technology to drive efficiency and impact, as this came up as a theme, both in terms of doing more with less, as well as also having the data to make the business case. So I think it's a theme that's nicely connected with some of the previous conversations. So you all know the drill already. Please open the poll tab again. So in the question we'd love to hear from you or your perspective on is, in the past year, did you feel under pressure to consolidate any tooling? Yes, no. So while everyone is completing the poll, I'll come back to it in a second. Also, just quick note as to the findings of the research report. We do hear from our HR leaders who were surveyed that there is an increasing pressure to find tools and software that can do many things simultaneously, reducing complexity and providing cost-effective solutions. 85% of HR leaders reported felt the pressure to consolidate tools right now. And also HR leaders reported that ease of use and all-in-one features were the two most important factors in deciding on a new tool. They often highly impact adoption, so also de-risk decisions, and aspects like impacting the inability to prove ROI, data inaccuracy and inadequate HR tools. So maybe they're too narrow, they're not actually providing everything that's needed, or they don't give you the data that you actually need to maybe report back to your organization. And 65% of HR leaders believe that many HR tools are difficult to use and are built with HR people in mind, not necessarily the managers and the employees, which actually hinders adoption potentially. And now looking at the take from the poll, we actually see a very sort of like similar picture here, with 69% felt the pressure to actually consolidate tooling. So very much also something that's present in the audience that's here with us today. So question that I would like to raise to all of you experts here on the panel is, can you share your approach to selecting and potentially consolidating HR tools to increase efficiency, to reduce complexity? How important is focusing on ease of use and all-in-one abilities or capabilities for you? And what's your take on some of the trends that we've been hearing about here from the research report? Who would like to kick us off?
I'm happy to kick off on this one. I genuinely don't believe that there's a blueprint answer for every business. I think it really is based on your profile, knowing your business, the employee needs, and what levers the business needs to pull to be successful. My approach has always been to map out the employee lifecycle journey and assess tooling against each kind of benefit or requirement, as opposed to kind of starting with, you need to consolidate or you need to have all in one system. I do it from the actual needs right across that life cycle. That's really key for me. But I do go by the principle that, if you can't fully integrate, then it needs to be an all-in-one. It's just got to be seamless.
I agree with that. We also started with the employee journey, looking at all the different aspects that sort of contributes to our employees' career development, career growth, and picking us as an employer of choice. And with that in mind, looking at what would give us the most efficient way, but also the other aspect of giving manager a tool that they could sort of work efficiently with their teams, get the overview, get their tasks, but also seeing, okay, where do we have gaps, skill gaps, development gaps, and so on. And then I think also for our team to be efficient, to have, as you said, seamless integration, but also pulling the data, drawing conclusions, and so on. So that was the three aspects that we worked with.
And I think also just looking ahead, obviously there's always the ambition to have the best tool stack at any particular point in the history of the company, right? But to also keep in mind, switching tools is a lot of overhead for the whole organization, not just the HR team or whoever might be involved in implementing it, but also for everyone else who's then going to use it, right? Just getting used to the interface, the functionality, but also switching often or can mean that you might then be, missing certain functionality of the tool you had before in the new tool that you're using, right? So you have to be really careful with switching. So I think always having a little bit of a foresight of where's the company going, how fast are we growing, and having that in mind when you're building your tool stack, and to always have enough but not too many, because also having a dozen different tools is difficult for people to consolidate in the day-to-day. Also building the integrations with all of them is not always easy, and also to test those integrations, right? So more often than not, I've seen companies or supported them in implementing tools, and you'll see, okay, as Dee already mentioned, having the data flow from an ATS to an HRS, for example, and you see actually, even though technically they have that integration, the data isn't flowing over quite correctly, and then there's new workarounds that you have to build in to actually correct some of those mistakes. So Lee, I completely agree, having some sandboxing, pilot testing, etc., and getting the different stakeholders involved. So whether that's IT, finance, maybe even the legal department or external providers that might need to get access to that platform as well is crucial, and just kind of, crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's before you then launch the tool and are ready to use it.
I agree with that, Maria, and I was just going to say as well, I think you've really got to look ahead at the scalability of what you're doing here. It depends on the composition of your business, but you've got to look at it for global scale, but you can't ignore the local relevance. I think you mentioned the word nuances. You need to test the hell out of it, basically, to make sure it works locally if you are a global business, especially a matrix one.
Perfect. Thank you so much for all of these great points. And I think we already briefly touched upon it in the first question, where I think Lee also spoke about using internal resources, but also sort of like some of the newer capabilities of tooling, maybe even AI tooling. So how are you leveraging emerging technologies to enhance the capabilities of your HR tool to drive greater organizational impact of your HR team? So what's the journey been like for you, and where do you think you're heading?
Well, we're elaborating quite a lot right now with tools to create learning. So both AI bots or AI avatars that would sort of record learnings. We create the slides, and then we will have some professional sort of interface to that, creating those podcasts automatically out of reports and so on. So lots of things that we are elaborating with, apart from the I think soon to be standard chatbots and so on to our for our processes, performance processes, for example, and so on.
Yeah, we're looking at AI in a like a service desk and shared services capacity. We want to flip the human response round to have the canned AI responses to reduce the traffic. But we've had a little bit of resistance because we don't want to lose the human element versus the robot element. That's the big debate at the moment. What's the percentage of each side? So it's not smooth sailing, and we're just standing up a lot of concepts and trialing it currently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think also into the tool selection is trying to keep an eye on to what extent the different tool providers are actually keeping an eye on that topic and integrating AI solutions, for example, into their functionality. I know Leapsome has actually done great work on that, so I think that's really great, in summarizing text or making text suggestions to make a performance review feedback easier. For me personally, and I'm not sure if I'm the only one here, but I'm definitely not a word wizard, so even just writing emails, typing in, write an email that is supposed to say X, Y, and Z, for me personally saves a lot of time in my day-to-day, because I'm not a poet in that sense. I'm not a content writer. So even just in the day-to-day, kind of lifting the load. And I think what goes hand in hand with that is to create an awareness for people within your team or the organization of what AI can do, and to actually maybe provide some training, because there might be some people who actually have great resources and connections and touch points with these new age technologies that can really make your day-to-day easier, but some might not, right? So really pushing productivity and efficiency for everyone around you and sharing that knowledge, and maybe having short training sessions, but also keeping an eye on compliance, right? So what are the guidelines you want to apply internally, and how you want to use those tools, and what maybe you don't want to use them for, what data is okay to put in to some of the GPTs out there and whatnot, I think is a great starting point to kick off the conversation.
Awesome.
But it's definitely something that is here to stay to make our life more efficient. I created sort of skills frameworks now, just uploading our job architecture and saying create a skills framework for this and that skill, and it was like that's something that pops out. It's amazing. It's mind blowing. It would take me days to do it, and it was done in 5 minutes, and it was really good. So I think don't be afraid of using it for those kinds of tasks, because it's really, really good.
Yeah. Amazing. Maybe just to quickly summarize some of the insights so far from the 3 themes that we discussed. I think, first of all, when we discussed of how to focus on what theme or what core programs to hold on, I think that was a really powerful statement of keep the eye on the ball. So not completely changing the strategy, but rather being creative. Where can you use internal resources differently, AI tooling, flexibility in some of the internal roles, or bringing in flexibility from the outside, having T-shaped staff, also not underestimating, not being too modest of what resources you actually have in-house. Then I think on the second theme, what we heard is being laser focused and on top of your company data to make a business case, but also making sure in the first place you really understand the overall business strategy and how your HR initiatives really support that, bringing the right stakeholders as you make the business case, and really using the data you have available across your tool stack to really strengthen that case. And I think on the third theme now, we all know technology is not an end in itself. It's really like a means to support us to have impact and reach our objectives across the business, in particular, in this case now in the people function. And I think that was really, really great advice you shared, Lee, in terms of mapping out the employee life cycle and really figuring out like where and what tooling you need to actually really deliver an exceptional experience across the life cycle. Making sure you also think about the other stakeholders. So not just how does this work for the HR team, but how does this work for the employee, for the manager, which Pernilla, you pointed out. Making sure there's a strong data and analytics layer, and really looking ahead also at the scalability of tooling. And we did want to I would also ask you to think about your takeaway, so we can share this in a couple of minutes. And what we also wanted to share with all of you today is based on the conversations like this one that we keep having with our customers about their ongoing challenges. We very much understand there are pressures to consolidate tooling. It's important to get more done with less, as Pernilla said, and having the right insights, the right data to maximize your impact. And what I can actually share with all of you today is this, obviously, listening to this customer feedback guides us as Leapsome, and we are the AI-powered people platform that drives HR excellence and high-performing teams, and we're actually now expanding our scope. So we are starting to offer a broader range of supporting workflow management, so really automating and enabling more of your processes across the people organizations, as well as also providing further services around absence management, payroll, time tracking, document management, and so much more. So I'm going to actually show you very, very high level what's coming. But if you're interested, because this is really going to be touching the surface, I would encourage you to sign up for our webinars that are coming up in the beginning of November, to sign up for a wait list for our Leapsome HRIS. There is an early access coming as of next week. That's October 16th. That's predominantly for German customers in the beginning, but it's going to be rolled out to other geographies in the future. Or reach out to your customer success manager or book a demo. But to just give you a taste of it, and again, this is very high level. I'm going to be sharing my screen with you and just going to show you. I think a lot of you will be familiar with Leapsome and the existing functionality. This is now the scope with all new modules also enabled. And if we think along Lee's point, along the employee life cycle, I just want to show you that we now also then offer integrations with ATS providers. So once you have actually hired someone, there's a direct link then to Leapsome, and you can immediately start working with this candidate now as part of your employee base. within your employee base or your system of record, you can have all the attributes you need within the system. There's a lot of presets. You can also add additional ones. So this really helps you to have all the employee information in one place. And then also if we look at the document management, we also enable, let's look at the templates, enable you to do your document management and document creation at scale. So you can generate all kinds of different document templates, have them filled out with multiple variables at scale. They can be sent out for an automatic signing process, being added to the employee profile. So you don't just have your employee database, but also all your document management, signature processes. And all of this is obviously then visible to the employee in their profile as well. So I have access to all of my sort of like information. I could update information in self-service as an employee. Obviously, there can be all kinds of approval policies set up. I can obviously then also go to see my documents. So all of this is available here. There's then the opportunity to have your preparatory payroll within the system. There's for the German customers relevant, there's a Dativ integration coming. I can do my absence management with Leapsome then. So I can request, as an employee, I can request absences. As a company, you can set all kinds of absence policies to obviously account for the different needs of different geographies, etc., different compliance requirements. You can do time tracking. I'm not going to go into that if that's something that's needed. And then again, speaking about the impact of a people organization, you can set up all kinds of different workflows to help you automate processes to take some of the manual work away. So if we, for example, look into just an onboarding workflow that's being set up here, you have different triggers that basically trigger this process to automatically run. You can set it for different target groups, and then you can have all sorts of steps. So this, for example, is an onboarding workflow where there can be different alerts, different emails, different checklists being sent out to different people to really help you to sort of automate some of these steps that might otherwise be manual work for your team, and also make sure that all of the data is completed in the system and that it's basically a smooth process for the employee, for the manager, as well as for the HR or reduced work for the HR team. And then again, I think we spoke a lot about analytics and the importance of data. There's obviously, this is something we always focus on a lot. And here there's already some built-in analytics data available in the system. There's a lot more to come, where you basically then also have easy access to your data and being able to report that back to the executive team as needed. So this is just very, very quick high-level overview. I just wanted to give you a bit of a taster. And again, it's like linked to all the themes we've discussed of really making it easy to have more impact as a team, have the data available, automate, augment processes wherever that's possible. And it really comes out of just listening to our customers. And a lot of them asking us, why have you built this yet? We really want this also from Leapsome with the same ease of use, the same customizability, and the same sort of like appeal that it really has to managers to really and employees, in addition to the people team, to really wanting to be working in the system. So that's the sneak preview, and I hope this gave you enough time to also gather your thoughts, as I would now love to actually capture your learnings from the session so that we can actually have a really lovely summary of takeaways for the audience here today. Who would like to start?
Maybe I kick it off because it'll be real quick. Or do you want to go, Pernilla?
No, you go.
Okay, cool. I would say my main takeaway is that, yes, times might be tough right now, but there's always an upside to every downside, right? Even though obviously for those who are experiencing, they might be a little bit too optimistic, but nevertheless, there's great opportunities in every tough time, right? It's a great opportunity for teams to revisit their priorities, for companies to really align on their needs and to make great strides. So once things are picking up again, you'll be ahead of the wave.
to Marie's point, I really agree. This is gives you, this sort of challenging time gives you an opportunity to rethink what you're doing, and I think that's a good thing, to revisit, you know, your processes and ways of working. But I think from this forum today, also just sharing experiences with other colleagues and peers in the business is so valuable. You seldom take the time to do that. So listening to you, Marie and Lee, and talking to you, Jenny, has been very sort of learning for me as well. So thank you for that.
Same.
Yeah, and a similar theme, you know, these are all shared problems. But every time we do a webinar or I go to some sort of community event, you know, the amount of knowledge that's out there is phenomenal. So it's really powerful to keep joining those dots by having those conversations. And I also think we just need to keep linking whatever you do to the North Star and objectives to get the buy-in moving forward. And just really embrace the future of tech. I know there's doubters out there with AI and stuff like that, but it's here to stay. So I think the sooner that we become an early adopter of that, the more credibility we'll build in the HR world.
Well, thank you so much for these really powerful closing remarks. Really, really glad you could join us today. And thank you so much for sharing your insights, your experience, your tangible examples. And thank you to everyone in the audience for joining us today. And again, if you're interested about the HRS, we have webinars coming up. We also have a lot more webinars coming up on other topics or even live events. So please check our events page. And yeah, we'd love to see you again. And thank you all so much and have a lovely rest of your day.
You too.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you. Bye all.